If you're ever tasked with decommissioning a server room and taking down a network, as you go through the server room, you're eventually going to come across this. What is it? What is it called? What does it do? Well, I don't know what it's called, but I call it an infrastructure panel, or an infrastructure wall, or an infrastructure board. I'm Isaac, we're Offisavvy, and I'm going to show you how to turn this into this. Oftentimes, you don't know what you're looking at, and sometimes this stuff is owned by the customer, sometimes it's owned by the building that they're in. At that point, a way that you can deal with that is get their IT person to come in, go through everything with you, and identify what they want taken out. In this case, I had the customer put pieces of blue tape on all the items that they were sure that they owned that they want to retain. When you do these, you can't really take anything for granted. The best thing to do is start by eliminating things that you know of. I'm looking here and I say, okay, well, this has to do with the cameras. We've already taken out the cameras in this suite, so I know that there's going to be no problem when I disconnect this. But we've already disconnected the server, removed the tower, cut the Cat6 data, gotten it out of here and cleaned up, but this is all still here, mainly because one of these boxes, it's actually this one over here, Brevo, this is the access control system. Some access control systems will fail to the locked state, meaning when they get turned off, when they get disconnected, they automatically lock everything up and nobody's access cards will work anymore. You don't want to do that, obviously, if you and the rest of the moving team has an access card and you need to access this suite during the rest of the decommission. In this event, you can end up in a situation where A, you leave at the end of the day and then can't get back in, which is never good on a deadline, or if they remain unlocked when the system shuts down or fails, you can end up in a situation where you may not have an ability to secure the suite. The gist of what I'm trying to say is that this can be a challenging smorgasbord of different things to try to identify and wade through. The best thing to do is to start with the customer tenant, have them identify everything that you need to remove and retain for them, or have them do it themselves. And then from there, start to troubleshoot. You can look up the manufacturers, look up the device if you don't recognize it immediately to determine what type of a device it is. Oftentimes surveillance boxes and access control boxes can look almost the same. All this stuff has to be dealt with during the decommission, and oftentimes you have different parties and teams that are concerned with their equipment, and other times, they are getting everything new somewhere at the new location, and they just want you to clear it out and throw it away. So even once you have determined that everything belonging to the tenant from the space you're clearing out is gone, you still have to consider the building infrastructure, communications company, utilities that might still have modules or communication wires running through this space. And unless you 100% know what it is, the best policy is not to touch it. What I like to do early on when I do my initial walkthrough of the space is I'll come up and I'll take a nice photo of this entire panel, and I will send it off early on asking the client, hey, can you give me an idea of everything on this wall you want to retain, etc. Now, this is a challenging email for them to receive because obviously, even if they're the IT person, they may not know what every single box is on this wall. Sometimes on a large corporation, the IT guy you're sending it to or the customer contact has never even been in the server room. But what that does is it brings a level of awareness and gets everybody talking about this early in the process leading up to the relocation and decommission so that they can start asking those questions and they can start giving you some kind of feedback and putting into place maybe the site visits and the things that they need to do on their end to make sure that by the time the move comes, you have as much guidance as possible. I like to label everything when we first start in the server room. If I'm not sure on a particular item, I have it all labeled, don't touch, until we've had time to figure things out on a case-per-case basis with each of the items. So where I'm standing used to be where the server racks in this server room were. This is all the network cabling. They were attached into the patch panels that were on the server. When we took out the server, we needed to move it over to the new location, so we just cut all these wires back. We know that all the wires coming into this server rack belong to the customer's network. They're moving their network, so cutting all these wires is not gonna affect them in any way. There are situations where a server rack might have some stuff in it that belongs to the building, other stuff in it that belongs to the customer, or rather the customer has a system that's communicating with the building system, for instance, access control, and in cutting that can cause a disruption if it isn't done properly or shut down properly before you do that. However, most of the time you can chop everything on the back of this server rack, get the server rack out there, get it back set up, and what you end up with is all of your network cable. Mainly, this network cable is for the data going to each of the workstations, each of the cubicles, each of the offices, conference rooms, etc. You might have some surveillance. You might have anything in the whole suite that needs data that's tied into the network will be left here. Next thing that has to happen is once the customer's all moved out, we are doing the decommissioning here, which is part of what we're doing in this room. We need to pull all the data wire out of this space. The customer, in moving out of the space, has a requirement in their particular lease that they need to get all this data wire out. And in doing so, there's really two minds to how this all goes down. On one hand, you say, wait, isn't that wasteful? The next person's gonna have to do the exact same thing. They're gonna have to have the exact same wires. And the short answer to that is yes, it does seem pretty wasteful. In some cases, I've seen new people come in, be able to use the same data wire, but more often than not, it needs to be cleared, especially at least from when you have these multi-tenant buildings, people moving in and out. What will happen is if everybody isn't cleaning up their network and getting all this stuff out of here when they move out, after 3 or 4 tenants, these buildings would end up with a big giant mess and nobody would be able to figure out what anything was because there's so much wires everywhere. We just did a project very similar to that and it made it very difficult to make sure that we were pulling out the right stuff, that we weren't accidentally messing with anything that wasn't part of the customer's network because there was just so much stuff up in this building's roof, up in the ceiling above the drop ceiling that was left behind from previous tenants. So I'm kind of two minds of this, but generally speaking, if you're decommissioning, more often than not, you're gonna need to pull the data. Okay, so today we just touched on a small part of what it takes to take down a network and decommission a server room. If you have other items that you're curious about in this process, comment below, reach out to us, and we'll make a video about it. Thank you. Offisavvy, Isaac, out.